studies in many other cities.
Right.
So, what are the kind of commonalities across cities you find? Like lead problems common, the age of the infrastructure?
Well, you know, it's fascinating because lead is one of the oldest problems, environmental toxins known to humankind. I mean, it is the first one, and we have laws there to protect us, and those laws are being broken all around the country. And that has created massive distrust of the Environmental Protection Agency, who is a key actor in a bad way in Flint, state regulatory agencies. Bottled water use has skyrocketed in the aftermath of Flint because people don't trust their water anymore. And you can't necessarily blame it, because if we can't stop a problem with lead in water, which, you know, we have laws against, and you prove these laws are being broken, why should you trust your water? Why should you trust these statements? And then, on the other hand, we have the very, very newest problem, at least in terms of our ability to use these molecular tools to delve into it, and that's the microbiology of the built environment. Legionella, you know, we don't have any laws, 0 laws to protect the public from Legionella growth in water systems. We're currently trying to think of ways to protect the public. And so that's part of the debate we have about who's responsible for this problem, how are we going to fix it. But anyone who's been out there sampling knows that we're finding a lot of Legionella in homes, in hospitals. That's just one of many opportunistic pathogens that we're learning about. And so to me, that's, you know, a little bit more exciting work, and it's proactive, and we still don't have solutions yet, but that's what science does. We find problems, add to the debate about societal priorities, and hopefully come up with solutions. And Sloan has done an amazing job of advancing that cause. And, you know, as I stand here today, it's very, very possible without the Sloan funding that no one ever would have known about what happened in Flint. It's scary to think about. The problem had been covered up before we got involved for a year and a half. I can almost guarantee you no one ever would have heard about lead or Legionella in Flint if our group hadn't been involved, and that was partly through Sloan money. So we're finding these problems, and we're engineers. We'll try to find solutions, but you can see it's a brave new world, you know, and you can see how bad it can go wrong. And my fear is it's going to go wrong more frequently than it goes right. And part of it is this lack of humility. And again, that's why I love microbiomania so much in terms of just, you know, communicating these results to the public. The public can understand this. But rather than reading press releases in scientific journals, they're going to listen to what you say in sidebar conversations. And those end up carrying more weight. I mean, a word from one of your researchers on social media, that's going to spread around the world 20 times before the truth even gets its boots on, as they used to say before the internet. But yes.
Thanks. That was really, really important for us to hear. And a lot of us in the indoor air community run into this situation often with, for example, ozone generators. And recently I got into a big argument on Twitter about radon control. And so how do you effectively communicate your knowledge and science in a way that a public can understand? I mean, blogging, it seems like maybe blogging didn't always work for you.
Oh, I think it did.
It did.
You know, I got the wrath of people who don't like hearing truth tellers and being criticized, and, you know, that's fine. But without the blog, you know, even folks who want to listen to reason would have had nothing to grasp onto. So one of the things, and I could talk all day about this water defense group, but one of the things they were trying to do is convince Flint residents they needed $10,000 filters to make a safe bath or shower. And Mr. Smith has one thing there where he was going to get a cut of that money. And so he was later let go from water defense, so that was one good outcome of that. But we were able to post on that on our website, and we were able to show that these filters were complete pseudoscience. I mean, you know, there's crazy claims like the water going through the filters, cows would drink it and get 40% more milk, and so imagine how great that's going to be for you. It removes all the bacteria, it stops scaling, it protects your plumbing, and this is all on Facebook. And So we chose to engage with these people. I think most scientists, and rightly so, I'm not going to blame anyone, I mean, who needs this in their life, would yield the battlefield. But I think that's a big mistake. I think that we scientists have to get out there and engage the public, and if we're credible, if we're trustworthy, most people will listen to you. They won't listen to a few of the critics who want to believe that they're being used as guinea pigs by the federal agencies, and you know, there's always a few of those folks. And again, I don't even blame those people after what they've been through, because you know, they literally live without civilization as we know it for 18 months. So, yes.
Excellent presentation, thank you. One of the things that comes to mind is this probably is not the first or the last time that something like this will happen. If you could do it again, if you could go back, what would you do differently next time in anticipation of something like this happening again? How would you approach releasing information, maybe focusing more on the social platform, if you will, for credibility and building trust? What would you do differently next time, or if you could do it again? How would you
know,
approach
I mean, what's interesting is I wouldn't do a single thing differently. You know, I've thought very, very carefully about this. We had long conversations before we talked about engaging this online news, you know, group. Are we doing a disservice by, you know, calling attention to their crazy science? Should we have let this person run amok? So we thought it through very, very carefully. There have been horrible consequences for me personally. I can't talk about that, you know, here now. It wasn't easy. But I just think this is the brave new world of science that we live in. And there's a lot of distrust of scientists, and some of it we've unfortunately earned because we're too frequently not deserving of the public trust. I mean, outside of this group, if you go to scientific conferences, we're all about salesmanship and selling our own product, which is our research, and selling our research areas, the greatest, newest thing, because we're competing with other groups. And the public is smart. They pick up on that fact. And so, you know, the only thing you can do as a scientist, I think, is to be trustworthy yourself. You also, you know, you're not selling trust. One of the hardest things I feel about being a scientist is someone stands in front of you, they want to hear something, and you have to tell them the complete opposite of what they want to hear. And that is so difficult to do. And they will be mad at you at first. You can be guaranteed. But the only thing you can control is what you say, and to always be trustworthy, always be honest, always err on the side of caution. And I have found that the public, the vast, vast majority of the public, gets that message. So, but I do think this is the brave new world of science. And it's a little bit scary. And I think we also understand the pressures we scientists are under and how certain people can behave in these ways, you know? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, when you took these stands, did you have your institution backing you?
Okay. Let me say, I absolutely love Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech has been great to me. You know, when we first moved there, I told my wife, no one can tolerate me for more than 4 years, so be prepared to move. And here it's 20 years. I haven't been fired yet, and I'm still there, so that's awesome. But, you know, there's also an academic reality. And the path I took is almost never taken by an academic, and probably with some good reason. The one thing that you can use as a guiding principle, and you'll never be disappointed, is that if things go right, your institution will own this. And if things go wrong, it's your problem. And as long as you never forget that, you won't be disappointed. So again, that's not a criticism of Virginia Tech. That's the reality of institutions. And so, you know, when we moved into Flint, if it had gone wrong, I would have lost my job. I mean, I don't care how many titles or awards I've got. If you think you're safe when you cross these lines, you know, one mistake, you can lose your job. And so I've got nothing but great things to say about Virginia Tech. They've been very supportive of me. They did not fire me, even though they could have many, many times. But that's something other institutions don't have. For instance, when I was in my battle with CDC, which is a whole different study, I've been told by faculty that have large health research programs that they would never have been allowed to say what I said in relation to calling out CDC for their falsified science.
Well, I would just say for the younger and even more vulnerable people that it does really help to, if you're working for an institution that is reasonable and supportive, it really helps to go and speak with the lawyers of the institution.
Well, I would caution you against that, because I guarantee you, if you had that conversation, you would be told not to do this sort of thing.
Well, it helps to have the backing of a group when you're taking an individual stand.
But the nature of institutions is such as if you ask for that permission, you will not be granted that permission. And once you know, and they've told you not to do it, then what are you going to do? So I would tell you, I mean, this is just my opinion based on years and years of experience. I mean, if you want to go and have conversations with older colleagues and get their advice or talk to the lawyer, forget it. I mean, they're going to tell you to yield the field, to stay away from this at all costs, because they're so risk averse. We, as faculty, are risk averse. We have all this academic freedom. We hardly ever exercise it. Why? It's because we've invested so much in our careers. This is a dangerous path.
Well, maybe some people at the National Academy could say what protections they offer committees when the committee posts a potentially controversial opinion or reviews the science.
Well, but in that, you're protected somewhat by these institutions. You're still operating with the accepted boundaries of academia. And here, we're talking about crossing those boundaries. And there's many, many academics who've criticized us for what we did in Flint and said, this is not something any professor should ever do. So we've had some of our most vocal critics are from within academia itself. This is a highly contentious area. Yeah.
Hey, Elaine Cohn-Hubble. So it's this incredible.
We have one question over here, then we'll go to you.
Oh, I'm
yeah.
so sorry. I didn't see. This was just a follow-on, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so just a real quick follow-on. I am with the Environmental Protection Agency, and I think one thing that's particularly helpful for, again, the younger people who are not so seasoned, is if you do decide, if you've thought about this and you know what your motives are, and you feel this is something very important, be really careful and just clarify that you are speaking for yourself and not for your institution. And that one thing, if you're very clear about that and do that consistently, now again,
that
maybe
helps.
What you say won't have the weight.
Right.
Of, if I speak out and I say I'm Elaine Cohn-Hubble, maybe nobody cares. But if I speak out and say I'm speaking for EPA, I do have to get different clearance. So, and that's different in an academic institution.
No, it's really not. The way we set this whole thing up was so we could be cut loose very easily if this went wrong. So we set up the blog site completely independent of the school. I use my own funding to do this work. Some of you might ask how you can even do something like this at a school, in an institution. That's a long story in itself, because you can't use a penny of state resources to go save the world. So there's a very careful planning process that you have to follow, so you're not breaking laws when you do something like this. It's not easy. Yeah.
Yeah, Peter Ashley with HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control in Healthy Homes. I was concerned with some of the messaging on lead exposure that came out of Flint.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's, I think that's also a real disservice. To put it in perspective, CDC's benchmark for elevation right now is 5 micrograms per deciliter. And that's only within the last few years. It used to be 10. A lot of the kids in Flint that were classified as lead poisoned a few years ago wouldn't have been classified as having elevated blood levels. And the messaging that I saw in the media, a lot of it was, lifetime neurological damage, irreversible damage. And of course, that can be hearing that can be a worse health issue than the actual blood levels. And nobody was out there trying to provide this perspective.
Right.
Any of us who grew up during leaded gas, probably twice the blood lead, probably 10, 15 micrograms per deciliter.
That's a whole separate talk.
Yeah.
Equally compelling, but one of the myths that arose from Flint is these exposures were unprecedented. Really, this was a pretty amazing success story in preventing a tragedy, because the increases in blood lead that were detected were detected very early, and the state immediately intervened with the lead filters to help. And so as bad as what happened was, as you said, the elevations in blood lead were on the order of 20% to 30% of what was normal in Flint. So that is horrible. That is a tragedy, but it did not reach the dimensions to which it kind of reverberated in the national media and in the debates. And there's a great piece in Mother Jones about this I'll send you, where this writer who's been anti-lead for his whole career, a journalist, and he pointed this out. And he said that, the issue is that you can't get relief money unless you kind of oversell the problem to some extent. And unfortunately, some national media did that. Again, don't get me wrong, this was a tragedy, but as you said, in some ways we averted a greater tragedy by catching this early, by getting the state to bring in the lead filters. And when we visited Flint schools, I mean, the message last year was heartbreaking. So you can see the message of the showers here and how that affects Flint residents. Imagine we went to Flint schools with a positive science message, and we were told by teachers that many teachers, because these children were lead poisoned, they would not be able to learn. And some teachers had kind of given up trying. And so these messages are very, very harmful, not just as we've seen with microbiology and the built environment, but the lead messaging, I agree. It's been unfortunate. Again, not to downplay, it was serious, but as you said, the words that were often stated was permanent brain damage. Right. That happened in a very few cases, I think, that it reached that level, but the vast majority of Flint kids did not get that kind of exposure.
Did you see anybody in authority trying to give that perspective?
No, because the problem was the way this rolled out is all the authorities had some blood on their hands. Yeah. And felt that they could not call out these, water to anything, because EPA unfortunately botched this horribly. There was a great hero in EPA, he blew the whistle, but he was silenced. So all the normal authorities had none. They were just hunkered down in their bunker, and they weren't going to venture out. And so that's one of the reasons we had to speak out. And even so, we have to be very cautious because, again, no one's downplaying what happened here, but it's been, taken to such extremes in some of the media that you're right.
Thanks.
I'd just like to start out by saying that you shouldn't be afraid of celebrities like Ruffalo, because your picture looks just like David Hasselhoff.
Oh.
You got to stand up to the Baywatch.
All right, man.
Forget the Hulk. But actually, I'm actually.
Does he have a nonprofit too? Should I be getting ready for that? I don't know.
You've ruined this now.
But I'm going to say I'm actually sad that we're all sad that the Sloan funding is coming to an end. But I come from a perspective that I was pretty early in the whole microbiome with the shower curtain and all that kind of stuff. It was really fun. And one of the reasons I was able to get tenure of those was through private funding from a company that essentially they were funding me to look at the built environment to find all the bugs that were there. And in the back of my mind, I knew a little bit. There's a little bit of scaremongering, like bugs there, be afraid.
Right.
They're trying to sell cleaning products, and I believe I never oversold what I did.
You were within the bounds of scientific decency. That's important.
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And then when the Sloan came along, there's more freedom because they said, and they specifically would tell you and keep you in line. You can't say that.
Yes.
You shouldn't oversell it. Don't do that.
We need this in science
brilliant. So
badly. I mean, it kills me to see how that is damaging our relationship with the public. This lack of candor, this overselling, this.
But at the same time, when I was looking at that, I thought, well, there are places where this is interesting, and even if you didn't find a threat, there's the potential, for that. The patterns of movement of bugs and the spread of things in sensitive environments and things that aren't dangerous become dangerous when you're immune compromised, you have an open wound, right?
Right.
So do you have advice on how we bridge that to sell it to funding, to not oversell it? What's your advice on that for young people?
Well, that's really, kind of the dilemma, and we addressed that in an article we wrote on hyper-competition in academia late last year, where we were, just talking about our perverse incentives that we face as academics, and that if you aren't out there selling your work and competing against other topics and other researchers, that you will not get funded. And it creates this very, very vicious cycle. And, the normal researcher who's trying to toe the line of, Feynman science and pointing out the deficiencies in their work as well as the positive sides, and it makes it hard for ethical researchers today to thrive. And so I don't have an answer for that right now, except to call out the problems as we all know they exist. And we're on our honor, I guess, to behave within the bounds of accepted scientific decency in terms of selling our research, and those bounds are unfortunately getting bigger and bigger as we face the economic realities and our current perverse incentive climate in institutions, and all this focus on funding and metrics. And so I don't have an answer, except I think it's very, very dangerous. I think it's dangerous for the credibility of science, for scientists. I think it damages our relationship with the public, who does understand that sometimes we are not worthy of the public trust. And so this could end very, very badly unless we get it under control.
Great talk, Mark. And again, I think one of the things, and when you came to talk at the Sloan Foundation before this happened, or I guess before this part of the story happened, it really gave everyone at the Sloan Foundation just sort of the, wow, this is why we fund basic science. I mean, you need to have the basic information before you're applying it to anything in particular. My question to you is, what were they supposed to do with the $4.3 million? I mean, that's almost 10% of Sloan's entire budget. So I think my biggest grant, was generally like $1.5 million in this program. So. Okay,
so there were like 5 different grants that amounted to that amount of money. And you have to realize when this happened, the state had completely lost credibility. I mean, there's 15 civil servants indicted. No one trusts the word the state EPA is going to say. No one's going to trust the word the health department says. No one's going to trust the word the EPA says, and the CDC still had problems from how they handled Washington, D.C. So it's kind of like what happens when the authorities have no authority. And so they turned to this group of researchers with high hopes that this would be an independent group that would serve to help build trust. I mean, the person who was blogging that unprofessional information, her role on this project is to restore trust between the citizens and government. You cannot make this up. And so this professor is blogging all this unprofessional, misleading information. I try to reach out to them. I say, this is not helpful. They keep going, and they get caught up in this whole game of like, if we put Virginia Tech and the state down, we're up in the public's eyes, and we're maybe going to get more money. I mean, so there was very, very little thought to the money. Most of the money came from the state, $3 million to study Legionella. And there were many, many good researchers that could have been tapped from Sloan who were not involved in that work. So it's just incredible. You see like the world's best people sitting right there. They didn't get a penny of this funding. All of their insights that they could have learned and shared from Sloan were not at the table. And so, a lot of money, and it created nothing but distrust and angst as far as I'm concerned. I hope that I'm proven wrong, that some good work will come out of this eventually, but it was very, very painful to see, and it's not easy for me to stand up here and criticize other professors, some of whom, are my colleagues, but this what happened was truly outrageous.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, you're awesome.